The Fairmont Hotel in New Jersey sparkled like a palace on December 15, 2022. Golden lights draped every surface, transforming the grand ballroom into something from a Bollywood dream. Hundreds of guests dressed in silk and diamonds filled the space, their jewelry catching light from massive crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with jasmine and roses, while traditional Indian music mixed with modern beats created pure celebration. At the center stood Lmandori Sharma, 27 years old and breathtakingly beautiful in her heavy red and gold lehenga. The intricate embroidery caught the light as she moved, making her look like a goddess. Her dark eyes were lined with kohl, lips painted deep red, hands decorated with elaborate henna patterns. To everyone watching, she was the perfect Indian bride, traditional, elegant, and glowing with happiness. Beside her stood James Whitfield, 30, tall and handsome in his cream-colored sherwani. His blue eyes shone with genuine love as he looked at his new wife, completely unaware that everything about this perfect moment was built on lies. The British investment banker smiled warmly at guests, his hand gently holding Lmandori's as they posed for endless photos. But in less than 12 hours, this fairy tale wedding would become a nightmare that would destroy 3 families and end in murder. Lmandori had been playing roles her entire life, but none as important as today's performance. Born and raised in affluent New Jersey, she was the perfect second-generation Indian-American success story. Her father owned tech companies, her mother was a respected doctor, and Lmandori held an MBA from Columbia. On paper, she was everything any man could want: educated, beautiful, from good family, financially independent. Behind her charming smile lay a calculating mind that saw relationships as transactions and people as stepping stones. Hidden beneath silk and tradition was a secret that could destroy everything. She was 4 months pregnant, and the father wasn't the man beside her. The baby belonged to Arjun Khanna, a married Indian-American colleague she'd been sleeping with for 2 years. Instead of confessing, she crafted an elaborate plan. She would marry James, seduce him on their wedding night, then claim the baby was his when it arrived early. Risky, but losing her wealthy British fiancé was unthinkable. James Whitfield had never believed in love at first sight until meeting Lmandori at a Manhattan charity gala 8 months ago. The investment banker had moved to New York 3 years earlier for Goldman Sachs, and while he'd dated occasionally, no one had captured his heart like Lmandori. She wore a simple black dress that night, standing alone by the bar, looking slightly out of place among Wall Street elite. When James approached expecting small talk, he was surprised by her intelligence and wit. She spoke passionately about international business development, asked thoughtful questions about his London experiences, made him laugh more in one evening than he had in months. James came from Old English money. His father was a successful barrister, mother from aristocratic family, and he'd been Cambridge educated before entering investment banking. He still believed in honor, integrity, and true love, qualities that made him vulnerable to manipulation. What drew James wasn't just Lmandori's beauty. It was her apparent depth, family values, and connection to fascinating culture. She patiently explained customs, taught Hindi phrases, introduced him to family traditions with seeming genuine joy. Over 8 months, James fell completely in love, truly believing he'd found his soulmate. Dr. Arjun Khanna stood in the reception's back, champagne untouched, watching the woman he'd been sleeping with for 2 years marry another man. At 32, he was successful, handsome, married to college sweetheart Kavya with 2 young children. To the world, he was the perfect family man, respected cardiologist with beautiful wife and bright future. But for 2 years, Arjun had lived a double life. His affair with Lmandori started innocently at a medical conference where she represented her company's healthcare division. Professional collaboration quickly became stolen hotel moments, secret lunches, deleted text messages. When Lmandori called 2 weeks before her engagement party, crying about being pregnant, Arjun's world crashed. The pregnancy was definitely his. Timing left no doubt. He begged her to leave James, start fresh with him, even offered to leave his family. But Lmandori refused. "Are you crazy?" she said, tears instantly drying. "James has money, connections, future. You're a married doctor with kids and debt. This baby is going to be a Whitfield, and that's final." That's when Arjun realized he'd never really known Lmádori. The passionate woman he thought he loved was actually a cold calculator who saw him as fun distraction. In the weeks before the wedding, James began noticing inconsistencies. Lmádori, always open and affectionate, became secretive and distant. She'd step away for phone calls, claiming work-related, but her voice would drop to whispers. When he asked, she'd brush off concerns with kisses and smiles. Lmádori had gained weight recently, attributed to stress eating, but something about her body seemed different. She'd become emotional unexpectedly, crying during movies, snapping at vendors, having mood swings out of character. Unknown to James, Arjun had been sending increasingly desperate messages, begging Lmádori to reconsider. The weight of lying to his wife, combined with knowledge his child would be raised by another man, was driving him to breaking point. As the wedding day approached, Lmádori's desperation grew. She knew she was running out of time before her pregnancy became obvious. Every day was a gamble, every outfit carefully chosen to hide her changing body. The night before the wedding, James couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. But whenever doubt crept in, he reminded himself how much he loved Lmádori, how perfect they seemed together. He had no idea that in less than 24 hours, his entire world would come crashing down, and the woman he loved more than anything would be dead by his own hands. The ceremony itself was a masterpiece that would be talked about in New Jersey social circles for years. 500 guests filled the elaborately decorated ballroom, each table adorned with towering arrangements costing more than most people's monthly salary. Local news crews covered what was being billed as the wedding of the year, a successful British banker marrying into one of New Jersey's most prominent Indian-American families. James wore a cream silk sherwani while Lmádori was resplendent in her red and gold lehenga that weighed nearly 20 pounds. The fusion of British and Indian traditions created something entirely unique, with string quartets playing melodies that blended Western classical with traditional ragas. But beneath this perfect celebration, tensions simmered. Lmádori's smile never wavered, but those who knew her could see the strain around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. From the back, Dr. Arjun Connor watched with a face like stone, every moment of seeing the woman carrying his child marry another man feeling like a knife in his chest. Rajesh Sharma, Lmádori's father and successful tech entrepreneur, beamed with pride. This marriage to British aristocracy felt like the ultimate validation of his American dream. He had no idea his daughter's deception threatened to bring scandal upon the family name he'd worked so hard to build. As midnight approached, Lmádori's anxiety reached fever pitch. She excused herself to take medication that would temporarily reduce her pregnancy symptoms, stared at herself in the mirror, and prepared for the performance of her life. The presidential suite at the Plaza Hotel overlooked Central Park, filled with candles, champagne, and white roses. Outside, snow began falling as weather reports called for a significant winter storm. James carried Lmádori over the threshold, both laughing as they nearly knocked over flowers. "I can't believe you're finally my wife," James said softly, hands framing her face. "I love you so much, Lmádori." Her plan was simple: seduce him quickly, then claim their child was conceived on their wedding night. She had researched premature births, prepared stories about complications, even found a doctor willing to adjust medical records. But as they began undressing, James's Cambridge education and analytical skills proved sharper than anticipated. His hands traced her body, noting changes that didn't align with his expectations. "Lmádori," he said softly, pulling back. "Have you been pregnant before?" Panic rose in her throat. She'd prepared for many possibilities, but not such immediate observation. "What? No, of course not," she forced a hollow laugh. "Why would you ask that? Your body, there are certain signs. Changes that suggest current pregnancy." "I've gained weight from wedding stress," she said, voice becoming strained. All women's bodies are different. But James catalogued inconsistencies, comparing what he observed with his knowledge of anatomy. "These physical changes are consistent with pregnancy. Current pregnancy." "You're being ridiculous," Lmádori snapped desperately. "Are you seriously going to ruin our wedding night with crazy accusations?" The romantic softness in James's eyes was replaced by something harder, more analytical. Outside, the storm intensified, lights flickering as wind howled around the building. That's when Lamadouri's phone rang. Dr. A. Connor flashed on the screen. "Who is Dr. A. Connor?" James asked quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Nobody. Just someone from work." But the phone immediately rang again. James reached for it before she could stop him. "If it's work, there's no reason I can't answer." "Hello," James said, eyes never leaving Lamadouri's face. "Lamadouri? Thank God. We need to talk. You can't go through with this. James deserves to know the truth about the baby. About us." Blood drained from Lamadouri's face as James's expression transformed from confusion to horror. "Who is this?" James demanded. "I'm Dr. Arjun Connor. And I'm the father of the baby Lamadouri is carrying. The baby she's trying to convince you is yours." James staggered backward. "How long?" 2 years. I'm married with children, and I've been having an affair with Lamadouri for 2 years. When she found out she was pregnant, she chose you instead of me." James slowly lowered the phone. 2 years. Our entire relationship has been a lie." Lamadouri's survival instincts kicked in. "James, please listen. Arjun forced himself on me. I was scared to tell you. The phone calls. The secrecy. This wasn't rape, Lamadouri. This was an affair. Okay, yes, I had a relationship with him, but it was over before I met you. He's lying because he's jealous. Then you won't mind taking a pregnancy test. Right now." 20 minutes later, they stared at unmistakably positive results showing 4 months of pregnancy. With her final lie exposed, Lamadouri dropped the innocent act completely. The sweet, traditional girl vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating woman she really was. "So what?" she said defiantly. "Yes, I'm pregnant. Yes, it's Arjun's baby. But you're the one with money, James. You should be grateful I chose you." "Grateful? You lied about everything. Our entire relationship has been a scam." "Don't be so dramatic. Lots of men raise children that aren't theirs. You would have been a good father and never known the difference. I would have been living a lie forever." "What you don't know can't hurt you," she shrugged. "Marriage is a business transaction, and I was offering you a good deal." James felt something break inside him as he realized the woman he'd loved had never existed. Every moment of joy had been carefully manufactured by someone who saw him as nothing more than a means to an end. "I'm going to expose everything," he said quietly, voice shaking with rage. "The affair, the pregnancy, the lies. You can't do that. It would destroy both our families. You've already destroyed everything." Outside, the storm raged on, and inside their luxury suite, 2 people who had promised to love each other forever prepared for a confrontation that would end with one of them dead. The revelation hit James like a physical blow, but it was what came next that truly shattered his world. As he stood there processing the enormity of Lamadouri's deception, his phone buzzed with a banking alert. With trembling fingers, he opened the notification and felt his knees nearly buckle. "What is this?" he whispered, showing Lamadouri the screen. $50,000 transferred from our joint account to an A. Connor just 3 days ago." Lamadouri's face went pale, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "Arjun needed money for his kids' school fees. I was helping a friend." "A friend?" James's voice cracked as he scrolled through more transactions. "Lamadouri, you've been transferring money to him for months. Tens of thousands of dollars. Money I earned. Money I trusted you with for our future together." The financial betrayal cut even deeper than the emotional one. James had worked 16-hour days for years, building his reputation at Goldman Sachs, saving every penny for their life together. He had given Lamadouri access to his accounts because he trusted her completely, because he thought they were building something real together. "You don't understand," Lamadouri said, her voice losing its defiant edge as she saw the murderous look growing in James's eyes. "Arjun was threatening to tell you everything if I didn't help him. I was protecting us, protecting our marriage." "Our marriage?" James laughed, but there was no humor in it, only a bitter, broken sound that made Lamadouri step backward. What marriage? You mean your elaborate con job? You've been stealing from me to pay your married boyfriend while carrying his baby and planning to trick me into raising it. The full scope of his humiliation was becoming clear. James thought about his colleagues at work, his parents who had flown in from London, the hundreds of wedding guests who had watched him pledge his life to a woman who had been laughing at him behind his back for 8 months. His British pride, his sense of honor and dignity, everything that made him who he was had been trampled into the dirt by someone he had loved with his whole heart. When this gets out, he said quietly, my career is finished. No one will ever trust me again. If I can't even see through my own wife's lies, how can I be trusted with clients' money? With business deals? You've destroyed everything I worked for. James, please. Lmandori reached for him, but he jerked away from her touch as if it burned. We can fix this. We can make it work. I'll pay back the money. With what? James's voice was rising now, years of suppressed emotion and proper British restraint finally cracking. You don't have any money. You've never had any money. Everything you own, everything you are, has been built on lies and theft. The storm outside had reached its peak, wind howling against the windows like a living thing. The lights flickered again, casting strange shadows across the luxury suite that had been meant for romance but had become the stage for the destruction of 2 lives. You want to know the worst part? James continued, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. I actually loved you. I would have done anything for you. I would have worked myself to death to give you the life you wanted. And all along, you were just using me. That's not true, Lmandori protested, but her voice lacked conviction. I did care about you, James. In my own way. Your own way. The words came out as a roar. Your own way was to lie to me every single day, steal my money, carry another man's baby, and plan to deceive me for the rest of my life. That's what you call caring. James grabbed Lmandori by the shoulders, his fingers digging into her flesh through the silk of her wedding dress. Tell me the truth. For once in your miserable life, tell me the truth. Did you ever love me, even for a moment? Lmandori looked into his eyes, saw the desperate hope still lingering there despite everything, and made the final, fatal mistake of her life. She laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh or a sad laugh or even a nervous laugh. It was a genuine, amused laugh, as if the question itself was absurd. Love you, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. James, you're such a stupid foreigner. You really think this was about love? You were a meal ticket, a way out, a path to a better life. And you fell for it completely. Something inside James snapped with an almost audible crack. The gentle, civilized man who had been raised to be a proper British gentleman, who had never raised his hand in anger in his entire life, simply ceased to exist. In his place stood something primal and violent, something that had been sleeping beneath years of proper upbringing and social conditioning. You used me, he said, his voice unnaturally calm now. You stole from me. You lied to me. You were going to make me raise another man's child. And you think it's funny. James, I didn't mean, Lmandori began, finally realizing she had pushed too far, but it was too late. His first blow caught her across the face with such force that she spun around and crashed into the marble side table. Champagne flutes shattered on the floor, their fragments catching the light like diamonds. Lmandori tried to scramble away, blood streaming from her nose, but James was on her before she could reach the door. You think I'm stupid, he said, punctuating each word with another blow. You think I'm just some pathetic foreigner you can manipulate and steal from. Lmandori fought back desperately, clawing at his face, kicking and screaming, but James was bigger and stronger and driven by a rage that seemed to give him inhuman strength. They crashed around the suite, destroying the romantic setup that had cost thousands of dollars, leaving blood on the white silk and rose petals. Please, Lmandori gasped, her earlier defiance completely gone now. James, please stop. Think about the baby. You mean Arjun's baby? James's hands found her throat. The baby you were going to trick me into believing was mine. His fingers tightened around her neck, cutting off her air supply. Lmandori's eyes bulged as she struggled against his grip, her manipulative mind finally silent, her lying tongue finally still. She had spent her entire adult life using her charm and beauty to get what she wanted from men, but charm and beauty were useless against the primal fury she had unleashed. "This is what happens," James whispered, his face inches from hers as the life slowly left her eyes, "when you make a fool of the wrong man." When it was over, when Midori's body lay still on the marble floor of their honeymoon suite, James stood over her for a long moment, breathing heavily. The rage that had consumed him was already fading, replaced by a growing horror at what he had done. "Oh God," he whispered, sinking to his knees beside her. "Midori? Midori, wake up." But there was no waking up from this. The woman who had deceived him, stolen from him, and planned to ruin his life was dead by his own hands. James touched her face gently, almost tenderly, as if he could somehow undo what had just happened. Panic set in as he realized the full scope of his situation. He was a foreigner in America, a British citizen who had just murdered his Indian-American wife on their wedding night. No jury would believe his story about deception and betrayal. They would see only a rich white man who had killed his beautiful young wife, probably assume it was about money or jealousy or racism. With shaking hands, James tried to stage the scene to look like an accident. He moved Midori's body to the bathroom, positioned her near the marble tub as if she had slipped and fallen. He cleaned the blood from the living room, straightened the furniture, tried to make it look like a tragic accident on what should have been the happiest night of their lives. 20 minutes later, he called 911, his voice breaking with what sounded like genuine grief. "Please help me," he sobbed into the phone. "My wife. I think she's dead. I found her in the bathroom. I think she slipped and hit her head. Please hurry." Outside, the storm continued to rage, as if nature itself was responding to the violence that had taken place in the luxury suite high above Central Park. And somewhere in the city, Dr. Arjun Khanna sat in his car, waiting for a phone call that would never come, unaware that his affair had just cost 2 more lives, Midori's and, inevitably, James's as well. Detective Maria Rodriguez had seen enough staged crime scenes in her 15 years with the NYPD to recognize one immediately. When she arrived at the Plaza Hotel at 3:47 a.m., still in her off-duty clothes but with her badge clipped to her belt, she knew within minutes that James Whitfield's story didn't add up. "Walk me through it again," she said, studying the British man who sat in the suite's living room, still wearing his wedding sherwani but now wrinkled and stained. His hands shook as he held a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. "I went down to the lobby to get some ice," James repeated, his accent thick with exhaustion. "When I came back, I found her in the bathroom. She must have slipped getting into the tub." Rodriguez nodded, making notes, but her experienced eyes were cataloging inconsistencies. The bathroom showed signs of recent cleaning, too recent and too thorough for someone who had just discovered their wife's body. Most tellingly, there were drops of blood in the living room that someone had tried to clean but missed. The hotel's security footage told a different story. James had left the suite at 2:15 a.m., but there was no footage of him going to the ice machine. Instead, cameras showed him pacing in the hallway for nearly 20 minutes, clearly agitated. More damning, by 1:30 a.m., sounds of a violent argument could be heard through the walls. The medical examiner's findings made James's story even more implausible. Dr. Sarah Chen immediately identified the cause of death as manual strangulation, not blunt force trauma from a fall. "The hyoid bone is fractured," Dr. Chen explained to Rodriguez. "The bruising pattern on her neck is consistent with someone's hands, and there are defensive wounds on her arms. This woman fought for her life." "How long would it have taken?" Rodriguez asked. "Several minutes. Someone held her throat and squeezed until she died, which requires sustained intent and effort." The pregnancy revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. If Midori was 4 months pregnant but had only been married for hours, it raised immediate questions about timeline and potential motives. The breakthrough came when Dr. Arjun Khanna walked into the police station voluntarily, his face haggard and hands shaking. "I need to tell you about Midori Sharma," he said. "About the baby she was carrying. About why someone might have wanted to hurt her." Arjun's testimony painted a devastating picture of deception and betrayal. He admitted to the 2-year affair, to being the father of Midori's unborn child, to the financial arrangements where she had been stealing money from James to pay him. She was planning to convince James the baby was his. Arjun told Rodriguez, tears streaming down his face. I called her that night, tried to get her to tell him the truth. I heard him answer the phone, and I told him everything. I never thought he would hurt her. Phone records confirmed Arjun's story. The call to Midori's phone at 12:43 a.m. lasted for 3 minutes and 17 seconds. After that call ended, hotel security cameras showed significantly increased activity in the hallway outside the Whitfield suite. Maria Santos, a housekeeper working the night shift, provided damning testimony. She had been in the suite next door when she heard what sounded like a violent argument escalating into physical confrontation. I heard the man yelling, calling her a liar and a thief, Santos told Rodriguez through a translator. Then I heard crashing sounds, like furniture being broken. The woman was screaming for help, but then it got quiet. Too quiet. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. James's DNA was found under Midori's fingernails, consistent with her fighting back. Blood spatter analysis showed violence had occurred primarily in the living room before Midori's body was moved to the bathroom. Financial records revealed the pattern of money transfers from James's accounts to Arjun. When confronted with this evidence, James's carefully constructed story began to fall apart. Rodriguez brought him in for formal questioning, where his British composure finally cracked. You lied to us about going for ice, Rodriguez said, spreading crime scene photos across the interrogation table. The evidence shows that you strangled your wife in a violent rage, then tried to cover it up. James stared at the photos, his shoulders sagging as his defenses crumbled. She destroyed everything, he whispered. Everything I worked for, everything I believed in. She made me love her, and it was all a lie. So you killed her for it. I didn't mean to, James said, finally looking up with eyes full of anguish. I just wanted her to tell me the truth. But she laughed. She called me a stupid foreigner and laughed at how easily she had fooled me. The full confession came slowly, painfully, as James described the devastating revelations of the wedding night. He spoke about discovering the pregnancy, learning about the affair, realizing the scope of the financial betrayal. I loved her so much, he said, tears finally coming. I would have done anything for her. And she thought it was funny. That doesn't justify murder, Mr. Whitfield. I know, James replied quietly. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about justification. I was thinking about how she had stolen my entire life and was laughing about it. As the formal charges were read, murder in the first degree, tampering with evidence, filing a false police report, James thought about the wedding ceremony that seemed like a lifetime ago. None of those guests had known they were witnessing the prelude to a tragedy that would destroy 3 families and end with blood on marble floors. The trial of James Whitfield began 6 months after that deadly wedding night, drawing international media attention that turned the courtroom into a circus. CNN, BBC, and networks across India covered every detail as prosecutors painted James as a privileged foreigner who murdered his wife in a racist rage, while defense attorneys argued he was the victim of an elaborate con that would have destroyed any reasonable person. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Chen, focused relentlessly on the brutality of the crime. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she said in her opening statement, no matter what Midori Sharma may have done, she did not deserve to be strangled to death by the man who promised to love and protect her. James's defense team, headed by prominent criminal attorney David Morrison, countered with evidence of Midori's systematic deception. They presented financial records showing tens of thousands of dollars stolen, documented lies spanning 8 months, and testimony about the elaborate pregnancy fraud. This was not murder, Morrison argued. This was a man's psyche shattering under the weight of the most comprehensive betrayal imaginable. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a verdict of second-degree murder. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced James to 25 years to life, noting that while his emotional devastation was understandable, violence is never an acceptable response to betrayal, no matter how profound. James showed no emotion as the sentence was read, his parents weeping silently in the gallery. The successful banker who had once commanded million-dollar deals was led away in handcuffs, his life effectively over at 30 years old. The Whitfield family was destroyed by the scandal. Charles Whitfield suffered a heart attack during the trial and never fully recovered. Margaret Whitfield became a recluse, unable to face friends who had once celebrated her son's wedding. The family's reputation, built over generations, was permanently tarnished by association with the sensational murder case. The Sharma family faced their own devastation. Rajesh Sharma's tech empire crumbled as business partners distanced themselves from the scandal. Madhuri's mother, Priya Sharma, attempted suicide twice before eventually moving to India to live with relatives. The family that had once been pillars of their New Jersey community became pariahs overnight. Dr. Arjun Khanna perhaps suffered the most complex guilt of anyone involved. His testimony had been crucial in convicting James, but he understood that his phone call that night had been the catalyst for the violence that followed. His marriage to Kovya ended within months, unable to survive the revelation of his 2-year affair. He lost his medical practice, his children, and eventually relocated to California under an assumed name. "I destroyed 4 lives that night," Arjun told a reporter in his only interview. "Madhuri's, James's, my wife's, and my own. All because I couldn't keep my marriage vows." The case became a landmark precedent in American criminal law, establishing new guidelines for how extreme emotional disturbance could be considered in murder cases. Legal scholars debated whether James's response, while inexcusable, was understandable given the scope of manipulation he had endured. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a prominent forensic psychologist, testified about the psychological impact of comprehensive deception. When someone's entire reality is revealed to be fabricated, she explained, it can trigger a complete psychological break. Mr. Whitfield didn't just discover infidelity, he discovered that his entire identity and future had been built on lies. The media coverage sparked worldwide discussions about manipulation in relationships and the devastating consequences of deception. Support groups formed for people who had been victims of romantic fraud, while others criticized what they saw as excuses for domestic violence. Madhuri's story became a cautionary tale told in different ways by different groups. Women's rights activists emphasized that manipulation, while reprehensible, never justifies murder. Men's rights groups pointed to her case as evidence of how false romantic narratives can destroy men's lives. Immigration advocates worried about the precedent of a foreign husband killing his American wife and receiving sympathy from some quarters. The complexity of Madhuri's legacy troubled many observers. She was undeniably a victim of murder, carrying an unborn child when she died. Yet the systematic nature of her deception, the financial theft, and the cruelty of her final words to James made her difficult to categorize as purely innocent. Madhuri was both predator and prey, wrote Dr. Amanda Foster in her book about the case. She victimized James through manipulation and theft, but she became a victim of lethal violence. Both realities can exist simultaneously. James's transformation from respected businessman to convicted murderer served as a stark reminder of how quickly a life can be destroyed. His former colleagues at Goldman Sachs established a fund for domestic violence prevention in an ironic twist, given that their former peer was now the perpetrator rather than the victim. Prison interviews with James revealed a man struggling to understand his own actions. "I was not a violent person," he said 2 years into his sentence. "I had never hurt anyone in my life. But when I realized that everything I believed about love and trust was a lie, something inside me broke permanently." Mental health professionals studied the case extensively, identifying warning signs that extreme deception can push even non-violent individuals toward violence. The James Whitfield case became required reading in psychology programs studying the intersection of manipulation and violence. The final message that emerged from this tragedy was complex and unsettling. Deception in relationships, while common, can have consequences far beyond the immediate participants. Madhuri's lies cost her life, James's freedom, and destroyed multiple families. Yet violence remained unjustifiable regardless of provocation. 5 years after the murder, vigils are held annually on the anniversary, one for Madhuri as a victim of domestic violence, another as a warning about the deadly potential of comprehensive deception. Both vigils draw crowds, both serve important purposes, and both reflect the complicated legacy of a wedding night that ended in tragedy. The empty spaces left by destroyed lives serve as permanent reminders that some betrayals, while not excusing violence, can shatter human beings in ways that forever change the trajectory of everyone involved.